We're there? Welcome, everybody. We're still waiting on Msgr right now. Msgr is still here in confessions. I got finished first because I'm younger and, able to finish these things up a lot quicker, But no, so while we're still waiting for him, since we're already maybe about 10 to 15 minutes past 4 o'clock, I thought we would just get started. And when Msgr gets here, there's already in there, I can see some good questions for Msgr about what I was like as a young priest who didn't have gray hair. But here we are. But until then, just because, why don't we just get started with a few of the questions that are here. We want to know why St. Joseph is not mentioned at the crucifixion of Jesus, or really any of the Passion. And so there's quite a few theories around this, and I guess the best explanation is that St. Joseph had already passed away by that point. That's the Church's best theory. There's in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, so they came from the same, they're very similar to Catholicism. The really only area that they disagree with is about the Pope. But their understanding is that even when Mary was younger and when she got pregnant with Jesus, that Joseph had already been assigned to her as an older man because she had made this vow of celibacy, and that it was his job to kind of be protecting that. So the tradition there was that he was already an older man at the time when the two of them got married. But anyway, I think that's the best explanation is that, between when we last hear about him, which is when Jesus is 12 years old and they find him in the temple, that's 21 years later when Jesus is crucified, and so, that's a quarter of a person's life, and the most likely explanation is that he had passed away. So, and if any of you also, because we've got the written ones, I don't know if people want to raise their hand at some point. I don't know if we've done that in the past, but just to kind of pick through the ones again with Msgr. How are we going to bring back both species at all of the masses? Or when are we going to bring back both species? So that's a good question. It's something that I am open to. I guess my big thing is that the precious blood, one of the difficulties is when we have carpets in church, is that the carpet catches that, and there's no way of really getting that cleaned up until after Mass is over. And so what bothers me is that when there is a spill, and inevitably there's going to be spills when you start bringing back the precious blood, is that you get this spill that's on the carpet, and all we can do is basically walk around it, and people are going to end up walking all over the stain and standing all over the precious blood. It's very different when you drop a host, because when you drop a host, you can pick up the host, which is going to prevent it from being desecrated, and then you just look, is there any noticeable fragment that's on the floor? And if you've been able to cover that, you're able to show proper respect for the Blessed Sacrament. And if we didn't have carpets, it would be something where you could take the purificator, you could clean it up, and right away you'd already be able to, once again, prevent the Blessed Sacrament from being disrespected by being stepped all over. It's just my thing when it comes to having carpets in church, where that is where it becomes the difficulty. So for me, it's a matter of just respect for the Blessed Sacrament, and that's kind of where I am right now. Now, if you want to, we could start talking about getting new carpets in church. We can start doing that, but that's kind of where it is at the moment. So, all right. Will there ever be a 6 a.m. Mass again? No, again, if he comes down on that. No. I don't know. At the moment, the way things are working is that we have the 7:45 Mass, which has become kind of like the Mass that the kids go to for school. But then also we have our noon Mass, and our noon Mass is, I think, one of the best attended Masses in the area. During Lent, we had, I think, at times 130 people who were coming to Mass, which is about the size of our 7 a.m. Mass for daily Mass. And we're getting people that are coming from all over to do this. And I don't know if either of those Masses, because they're very well in place, and we have good reasons for them to be at the time that they are. I'm not sure if at the moment a 6 a.m. Mass is in the cards, but I think that's one of the advantages of trying to think with not just as a parish, but trying to think of the parishes in the area and how can we serve the people in an area, is that having a noon mass is a really great thing. We're serving the people in the area, and if another parish in the area has a 6:30 or a 6 o'clock mass, that could also be serving the people in the area. So that we're all working as a team, and we're not just simply competing with each other, though we are better than Queen of All Saints. So, all right. Yeah, right there. There's this Msgr Mark Ullrich. I don't know if you met this guy yet. You could turn on your microphone, maybe. So, Msgr, we just kind of started by asking a few of the questions so far, but I don't know. There's this one right here that was specifically addressed to you.
Addressed to me.
Addressed to you. So I want you to take this. I want you to read this out loud.
Dear Cora.
That's right.
Msgr, how was Father Paul when you were pastor? Who is the better pastor? Wow.
Just, I have access to...
Leo, this is a nice question. Thank you very much, Leo. I can see his handwriting. I know this is Leo and their hand. No, actually, that's a good question. Because when I tell people, and it's from my heart, but you always want to be honest. You know what I mean? And you think, well, am I being honest? But I don't need to be a pastor. I don't. So that's number one. I'm really happy not being a pastor, and so I think Father Paul is great to minister with, because for him as a pastor, which I've never had him as a pastor, even though I live with him, he was always telling me what to do and where to go, and he'd be yelling at me and stuff when we lived together. But this time, you think they know I'm kidding? Oh, good. But he's a great pastor from my point of view. Stays on top of things. Gets a little stressed at times. That's what I love. He gets stressed, I know. But it comes down. You got these big things that you need to get done or do, and so I want to help him. He knows that. I want to help him in any way I can. But sometimes you just, the buck stops here, and it's him. Who's the best pastor? I'll let you decide. They have no idea what I was like.
Right.
So you're good.
There's also the difference of, I guess I look at the pastors that I've had over the years, which was Msgr and then Father Jack Costello, and I'll tell you, once you become pastor, it helps you to see the people that you were living with and what they were in just a new light and a new respect. And, Msgr, I already respected him, but that's 40 years of experience. How many years were you pastor?
I was 12 at Sacred Heart Florissant, and then before that, I was 10 years in our city at Holy Cross. And then I had a little stint as a young pastor in Pine Lawn. You know where that's at? Hello. I was in Pine Lawn for 2 years, and then I went out to All Saints at St. Peter's, not as a pastor, I had a break, but it was, I know it was like a fill-in for me to be there at that time. So about 23, 24 years altogether.
Yeah, and that's a lot of experience, So I just know that there's a huge difference between where I was as a priest when I first started compared to where I am now, and it's the same way with anything. You just you learn as you go. So.
Should I tell them about you? Being an associate.
Sure.
One thing unique about this guy, having lived with him as an associate for 4 years, never had an associate that asked more questions. And he knows so much, you know that. He knows a lot. But he always was wanting to know more or how to do it right. And I never had that before, Most guys coming out know how to do everything right. Get it? They know how to do everything right. Father Paul was always pretty humble, and he should hear that. But he asked a lot of questions. How would you handle this? How would you do that? Funerals, baptisms, just a lot of stuff. I enjoyed it. I hope I did well guiding you. So.
Well, I'll leave that up to them too.
Yeah.
Okay, I know there's a big parish anniversary coming up, 100 years. can you share with us any plans for a celebration? And I guess because what is it? I think my first year here was 95 years, or maybe, I think it was the end of my first year.
Almost 3 years, huh?
Yeah, so that was the end of my first year, so we're probably at 97 years coming up here. So with it being 3 years out, no, I don't think I have any plans, and yet I have some people on parish council here that are hearing this, and so maybe this is getting the wheels turning, I don't know. So stay tuned. It's probably going to involve a huge fundraiser to get an HVAC system for just kidding.
Money. That's these bastards drive me nuts.
Money.
When is offertory, where parishioners bring it up, coming back? Oh, bring up the gifts? Yeah. I mean, sooner rather than later. I mean, it's been one of those things that's been more on the agenda than anything else. I mean, these things, I mean, it's not just as simple as saying it and it gets done, but it's also a conversation of, when do you have the time to manage, and I guess right now my bandwidth is pretty taken up at the moment. But definitely when we start getting into the summertime, things start to slow down, and that's the great time to start making those kinds of decisions. So stay tuned. It's coming.
It involves all the ushers and that they're on board.
Right. Yeah. We are right now also. We're live streaming. So if you wouldn't mind talking to the microphone, yeah.
All right. And just saying the ushers are all involved in that, so we need to get them on board.
Right. Who and what did your parents do? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Both of us?
Yeah, to both of us, yeah. So Dad was an electrical engineer, and he was an electrical engineer from the time he was a kid. So he tells a story about my grandmother, his mom, thinking that my dad was literally crazy, had him go to a psychologist because of how interested he was in color televisions. And so, but then he tells a story of my grandpa. My grandpa was a jack of all trades, just an incredible man. Internationally known for as an OBGYN. That's a story for a different time. But he also, but his training was in mechanical engineering, and then, but he spent most of his time as an OB. But my grandpa, just having that engineering mind, saw my dad and saw that my dad had and understood, I think, a little bit better than my grandma did. So he took Dad to the store the one day and got him like these parts that he could build his own color TV from scratch. And it's actually still sitting in the basement in my parents' house. And at one point, we were trying to clean up and we tried to get rid of the TV, and Dad exploded. And my brother-in-law was able to get it out of him why that TV meant so much to him. And it was because, I mean, that's just a reminder of our grandpa, his dad. So that's Dad, as he was an electrical engineer. He knew it since he was very little. Mom, she was a stay-at-home mom my entire time, but was really an expert with finances. I guess, stretching a dollar as far as it could go. But she also was a librarian and a teacher prior to getting married.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did she have a degree in that as well?
I guess so. Yeah.
You got a sweet mom, too. And a sweet dad. I'll try to make it fast, but it's fun to answer that question because my dad was a painter. And I always say if I wasn't a priest, I'd be a painter. Because I love to paint, and I think I paint pretty good. I don't paint pictures, artwork like that. My sister Carolyn does very well. But my dad did a lot of beautiful painting, and so he was hired by a religious goods store. Architectural bronze. And it was very close to Anheuser-Busch. He worked there a little while when he was younger, painting, because they did refrigeration and stuff like that, so he was a painter. But he got on with architectural bronze. So, I'm barely in the seminary, and my dad's going around to churches painting statues and polishing out tabernacles and religious goods like that, candlesticks and sometimes bronze pieces on a building, and so on. But that was his gift. And then he went into other things. He dabbled in different things, and then he came back where he was out of a job, not very long, and I'm a priest, and I'm now ordained. I'm at my very first parish, actually, St. Thomas More in Bell Ridge, which is long gone. And we had the ambo, the pulpit, redone, and the pastor gave me the chance to fix it and redesign it. We were going to make it a little bit larger. It was a little skinny thing. So it would, I called architectural bronze, and the guy there comes out and looking at it, and we had met through my dad and so on. He goes, "What's your dad doing these days?" And I go, "Well, it's funny you say that because he's looking for a job. He kind of is between things right now." He said, "Oh my gosh, if he's looking, tell him to come back. We'll take him in a heartbeat with a raise." I'm like, "Holy cow. I'm just a young priest. I don't know what I'm doing." So I called Dad, and Dad goes, "Oh my gosh, interesting. I think I will go back there." So he did. He went back, and he ended up retiring from there years later. And I can name the churches he's done, but many, many churches, tabernacles, statues. Statues are hard to paint. And getting the skin color right and all that stuff. And he had a gift for that. He's now deceased 8 or 9 years ago now. My mama worked many places. She worked in records in Clayton, so that probate, I think, stuff, and did that for years, but not real long, because she was home for us as little kids and younger kids at Assumption Parish nearby. But the other fun thing that I can show you is my parents both played music. So my mama played accordion and piano, and my dad played drums. And so many a weekend, Friday or Saturday, my grandparents were my parents. And that was horrible suffering, right? All the cookies and candies you want. And so we'd stay overnight. Mom and Dad picked us up on Saturday morning, had a little breakfast together, and it was kind of fun. And it was always fun. Probably kind of hard on them, but they loved to entertain people, and both were pretty extrovert, and also that was their way, because we never had a lot of money, but that was their way of making sure we had a little vacation each summer, and we go somewhere, and that was nice, but that was from playing music. Isn't that way too much information? And I'm an introvert. Yeah, I'm very quiet.
Self-reflective too, Oh, boy. Yeah. All right. Here's a good one. So, is bowing before the cross and altar required, or is it out of honor and respect? So, one knee or bow. So, I guess part of it is that sometimes we bow, sometimes we genuflect, and when do we do either? And the answer is, it's not strictly speaking required. So, if somebody has bad knees or something like that, it doesn't matter which. It's just a little head bows, good. What it is that it's whenever we cross in front of the tabernacle, it's a way of reminding ourselves and reminding also the people around us of the great presence that's in our church. I know I was working with these two guys who they want to do something on our property. They want to have a coffee truck come to our property. I remember taking them through church, and it had probably been a while since they had ever been in a church. And just simply the stopping and the genuflecting in front of the tabernacle, it was saying, wait, there's something important here. But as far as what to do when, it's if you don't have anything in your hands and you're outside of Mass and you cross in front of the tabernacle, that's when you genuflect. But then if you're holding something, even if you're outside of Mass, you just do a bow because it's, you don't want to topple something or spill something. But then what happens is when we get inside of Mass, which is basically from in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit onwards, is that it's always going to be a bow at that point, and that's kind of for two reasons. And the first one is that at that point in Mass, the center of our focus is not on the tabernacle itself, it's on the altar. So it's a different sign of respect there. And what we do is that because Christ isn't present on the altar yet, we're going to bow to the altar until the Eucharist is present. And then if you notice that when's the first time that the priest is going to genuflect in Mass, it's after he says, "This is my body, which will be given up for you." And at that point, he raises up the host, and then he genuflects, because now the Blessed Sacrament is on the altar. And so it's kind of like the bow when we get into Mass. The reason why we're bowing is because it's like, okay, we're still going to show a sign of respect, but we're also acknowledging that this is different than the tabernacle, and this is the place where the Eucharist is going to happen, but it's not there yet. And then we genuflect after the Eucharist is there. So, yeah.
The only thing I noticed later, lately with more and more older priests, is they can't genuflect. And so they'll bow, and sometimes it might be confusing to people, but it's better they bow than to fall forward.
Right. And then there's a second question on here. What is the one piece of advice you would like to give your parishioners? And I don't know. There's so many. I guess one of the best spiritual books I've ever read. It's about this thick, so it's manageable by anybody. It's Searching for and Maintaining Peace, and it's a great little book. And the central theme of the book is that every reason we have for losing our peace is a bad reason, and it's just such an interesting little book. And so I guess my one piece of advice would be to go find that little book, pay the $11 that's required to get it, and I think there's so much that's valuable that you can find in there.
The name again, Father.
Searching for and Maintaining Peace.
I think I ditto that. There's so many things you can say, of course, but if people were at peace, we're there. If you have the Lord, and then you're at peace and you're praying for peace, no matter what's going on outside, you know that you can handle a lot of difficult things, situations, if you're at peace. And that only comes from Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Ditto.
All right, Father. Excuse me. If one goes to Mass for Divine Mercy Sunday on Saturday at 5 p.m. Mass, is that communion still accepted for Divine Mercy? The answer is yes. The vigil Masses are going to count for Sunday Masses. Also, if one has venial sins and no mortal sins, are you then still in a state of grace? Or to be in a state of grace, is it that there means there's no sins at all on your soul? Thank you, Father. Actually, the answer is we're strictly speaking about mortal sin. And mortal sin in that case is it's a sin, you know it's a sin, and you're doing it about your own free will. So there's none of this, like when you find out it's a mortal sin, 7 years after you committed the mortal sin, you had no idea. Oftentimes this will happen with many Protestants who come into the church and having to do with some things like vasectomies or something like that. And they're like, Father, I had no idea, because that was just not a conversation in our church, And the answer in that situation is, well, that's not going to be a mortal sin, because you didn't know any better, And so, but what we're talking about, and when we're talking about a state of grace, we're strictly talking about you are unaware of any mortal sins on your soul. And, it's one of these things that I try to instill this in people is God, when it comes to our sins in confession, He's not playing a game of gotcha with us, So, it's one thing if we were intentionally withholding sins that we know that we've committed, and we're intentionally not telling the priest about them. But if it's a situation where we're making a good faith effort, and then all of a sudden we look back and we realize, oh my gosh, there was something that was either so traumatic that I never even wanted to think about it again in my past, and all of a sudden it's before my mind or something like that, or like I just remembered something years later. Well, what we believe about the grace of the sacrament is that the sacrament forgives all of those sins, even if we didn't confess them. As long as, again, we're not intentionally withholding. But then even then, what the church asks of us, because this is what Jesus wants of us, is that He wants us, the grace of the sacrament is so valuable that even if you've already been forgiven of that sin, we're still asked to bring that to confession, just as a way of being able to show our Lord and to be able to say sorry to Him for those things. So it's one of those things that our Lord is just, He's also merciful, but as far as venial sins, I don't know if there's a situation where anybody is fully aware of all the sins, that are on their soul or anything like that. So a state of grace doesn't mean that you're sin-free.
Agreed.
Yeah. You want to pull one out?
Sure. What if it's for you?
We'll pull a different one.
Besides evangelization, what does the church need most these days? Besides evangelization. They don't want to talk about that. Everything's evangelization. Trying to bring people to the Lord. Sometimes I wonder, what does the church need most? It's what's most important to me, and I think to Father Paul as priest, but good liturgy. Now what's that? Well, hopefully we come to liturgy, especially Sunday liturgies, Saturday evening, but we come there well prepared. And I think most priests I know are there, that they may not be the best preachers in the world, I'd be in that category, but they work at it, and they really work at it. The music, the preparation of the liturgical music, the lector. Do we have a good selection of lectors? The answer is, to me, yes. A lot of good ones. And then all the parts of the Mass. So does the Mass flow? Is it life-giving? Is it really prayerful? Do I find myself more prayerful when I'm at Mass because of everything that's going on? Then we're doing our job. We're doing about the best we can, and God supplies the rest. But that's huge. So if people happen to drop in church, and they still do, because I hear it every week. And so if they drop in, what experience did they have? Was it a good one? Now that would be true of the sacrament of penance as well, at confessions. That, how you handle people, how you prepare them, help them, and get God's grace filling up their hearts and souls, that's huge. That's huge. Either we do it right or, you just don't want to be off. You want to do your best. So those would be my answers, really. And then the other thing, what does the church need most? I just think there can never be enough things like this. There can never be enough socializing. And I think St. Francis does a pretty darn good job of that, but it's hard work, it's just hard to have enough different things going on. And, but there can never be too much. Opportunities for people to be together, meet each other, meet new people on an ongoing basis.
Next.
Right? Yeah, and I really don't think that people change all that much as our world feels so much different than probably it did 100 years ago, even 10 years ago. I think human beings remain pretty much the same, and we all have the same needs, and I think that's where our need for Jesus Christ is, and I think that's where our need for the sacraments are.
I'll challenge you on that.
Okay?
I think people are a lot more distracted today than ever before.
Sure.
You'd agree?
Yeah.
I think people are different in that there are so many things going on. Not just busy, but things that really absorb you. Hold on, let me check my phone. I want to see if I got any emails. I'll be right with you. That's what I do. That's different.
Yeah, and I think that there's new problems in every generation. So, if you're talking about, for instance, the people who went through the bubonic plague, you want to talk, that's going to be a problem that was particular for their age and history, and yet at the same time, what are the needs that we have as human beings? I think those needs are pretty similar. We have need of food, we have need of shelter, we have need of love and acceptance, we have need of purpose in our lives, we have, and I think we have need of community. All those different things, and I think that's one of the great gifts of the sacraments is after you get some of those basic needs met, and you sit back and you're trying to explore your life and trying to find peace within yourself. I think that's what everybody really needs. So. Comment.
I have a question.
Okay.
First of all, I think you need to keep welcoming people to Mass every week because I think just from me talking to my friends, there are still people trying to find a home.
So you're saying, so this is just so that we can get into the microphone, we need to be welcoming people to Mass every week because there are still people, I guess after all things new, that are still trying to look for a home. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my second question is, I found a rosary from my dad that is 7 different, it's a 7-decade rosary.
Oh, okay.
What's the deal with that?
What is the 7-decade rosary. I can tell you because I just learned that this past year. Do you know what this is?
No, is it Franciscan?
It's the Franciscan.
Yeah.
It's the Franciscan Crown Rosary.
Yeah.
So what this is actually, and this is something beautiful because this is directly tied to St. Francis of Assisi in our stained glass windows. What they are is that if you look at the stained glass window that is on the ambo side and that's up towards the very front, it's this picture of these two Franciscans, and one is kneeling down and one is standing up. And then there's a statue of the Blessed Virgin there, and she's holding basically like a ring of roses that have been tied together. And what that's doing is it's presenting the story of the Franciscan Crown Rosary, where there was this young man who, when he was a child, every May he would make a crown of flowers for Mary, and then he would give it as like a May crowning type thing. Well, he entered the Franciscans, and for whatever reason, his superior didn't want him to continue doing this. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was like a distraction from some of the other work that he was supposed to be doing. It's just like, hey, you need to spend less time with Mary and more time, in this other area. I don't know what it was, but so he felt really awful that he couldn't do that. And the story goes then that an angel appeared to him and gave him the Franciscan Crown Rosary. And what they are is that they are the 7 joys of Mary. And so we talk about there's the 7 sorrows of Mary, and I don't know if you've ever heard of that devotion before, but they talk about, for instance, what were the pains that Mary was experiencing as Jesus was dying on the cross. And but what the seven joys of Mary then are, well, if you want to look at them, they're in our stained glass windows. That's what the other stained glass windows in church are. Is that and so what our church is that it's actually the windows are centered around the Franciscan crown and what were the 7 joys of Mary. So that's what you're doing if you've got a 7-decade rosary, is that's a Franciscan thing, and probably you're only going to find it in places that have like a Franciscan background in it nowadays, like so St. Francis of Assisi, and you would pray it like a normal rosary, but you would go through. Some of them follow the joyful mysteries of the rosary, but others are a little different. The most interesting one is one that's not directly in Scripture, and that is the appearance of Jesus to Mary after he rose from the dead. And that's one of those ones that it's not in the Bible anywhere.
The Blessed Mother. The
Blessed Mother, right. And that's not in the Scriptures anywhere, and yet it's just kind of one of these pieces of Catholic reasoning that, Jesus loved his mother. She was such an intimate part of this whole plan that, of course, he had to have appeared to her. So, yeah. Yeah. You want to pull the next one?
Sure. Are we on the air right now? Are there people at home?
We are.
That's way too.
No. We're recording, not broadcasting.
We're recording, not broadcasting.
I take it back. Thank you. Do you paint on this? Father Mark, do you paint on this? Do you paint on the side? Pretty much on the top and bottom also. I don't know what that means. Father Paul, do you do electrical work on the side?
No.
Does this John Fetzel written all over?
It might.
Is John here?
Yeah.
Pretzel, are you here? Is that your question? It sounds like you. I don't paint on the side.
No, I came from a whole family of engineers. So I talked about my grandpa. He was a mechanical engineer and an OB. And then my dad was an electrical engineer. My brother's a software engineer. And somewhere along the lines, I just didn't get that gene. So, anyway.
Do you know much electrical?
No, I
Me
mean, not
either.
really.
No, I call John if I have electrical. I do not stick my finger in there. I call John first.
Right. Well, there are times like I would go onto YouTube and I would try to figure out something about the electrical, and they would say doing this, and oh, by the way, make sure that you don't make this mistake, because otherwise the whole place is going to blow up. And I'm like, nope. At that point, I'm not gonna experiment and trial and error on that. So, yeah.
Cooper won't say it, but you're a spiritual engineer.
A spiritual. Ooh, a spiritual engineer. Wow, that was
Spiritual engineer.
wow. That's
So
Who
now
else
you
have
can
you?
continue the family tradition.
There you go.
Yes?
Nobody? I thought somebody did. One.
Can we do a 4th of July celebration? So fireworks. Could this be a moneymaker? I don't know.
No, they cost money.
Yeah, that costs
They
money.
cost a lot of money, actually. You drive down to the Ullrich.
What, you couldn't hear that one? Is that what you said?
Oh, it was 4th of July. Can we
Yeah.
have?
Can we do a 4th of July celebration and it just says
Fireworks.
fireworks? Moneymaker? And, well, I mean, we do have people who will come onto our property on New Year's and just launch fireworks, and not something I particularly enjoy them doing, but they do it. So maybe you can join them. Find out who they are and report back to the pastor.
Church parking lots. Gather those kind of people.
Right. Do they ever get the security system installed in church? And how are the school bathrooms going for funds? So we were able to get one of our bathrooms funded completely for renovation, and but it's going to be an ongoing project just to raise the money for that, because as much as they need doing, we also have to spend our money in other places too. One of the things about All Things New is it kind of put us behind on our 5-year plan, and now it's a 7-year plan, and everything's 2 years more decayed. So anyway, and it's one thing at a time.
And everything's more expensive.
Everything is more expensive. Holy moly.
When it comes to parish.
Yeah.
I know it's true of your houses, but double that with the parish. Windows, everything.
Right.
Now, when you mention bathrooms, I know you don't mind my asking you this, Father Paul, but when you mention bathrooms, do you think of like the boys and the girls, a set of bathrooms? Because we have many. Like you would do 2 of them.
Right. So we
Yeah.
do we have, I think, 7 sets of bathrooms throughout the school, and unfortunately for the ladies, the men's bathroom, for various reasons, tend to be more damaged, and so they're a little bit more in desperate need of assistance. So, but yeah, we'll be fixing probably. It's going to be on the 2nd floor. We're trying to find a combination between visibility, where people can see the work that's being done, but also need. And unfortunately, the ones that are in the most need are in the most tucked away part of the school. So we're trying to get that negotiated. As far as security, we did last year. We got security cameras that were put up around the school, and actually, after the school shooting that happened last year, we had a gentleman who is a parishioner here, who owns a security company nationwide, who wanted to come in and just essentially because his children are in the school, he wanted to essentially supplement what we were doing around here to make sure that, for instance, the kids would be safe, maybe fix some, fill in some of the blind spots that we have on campus, because there's still a few places that don't have cameras on them. But I'll tell you, those cameras have really come in handy. Even if there are certain areas that we still wish that we had cameras, the stuff that we've been able to catch, we thought that, for instance, there was a retreat that was going on last year, and one of the parents called up and said, some of the other kids on the retreat broke my kid's glasses, and she was so furious about it, thought this was bullying and everything. Well, we caught what happened on camera, is that he put the glasses down while he was playing kickball, and then he left them there, and we saw exactly where it was. You could see him setting it down, and we fast forwarded to see what happened, and it was some kids from the back neighborhood, and they just saw these pairs of glasses, and they were just playing around with them, and then all of a sudden, snap! And so it was like, it wasn't A, intentional, B, it wasn't bullying, and C, it wasn't our kids. And so it was like, that just solved the problem. And so, but that's just one thing that we've actually been able to catch, and those security cameras have just been fantastic.
What about church? They were asking about church in that question.
Yeah, we don't have a security system per se. There wasn't ever a plan for church. I think it was the cameras that were the main one. But
You don't think one of Jeremy's isn't on the sanctuary area? It seems like he's got a bunch of cameras.
yeah, but they're not recording all the time. I mean, they're recording, like, they're set to live stream mass as it's going on.
Okay.
But right. Well, hopefully that answered that question. So, all right, bathrooms, everything like that. I'm starting to get down to the bottom here, so I'm not sure if that means we're almost out of time or. inspired you the most, and then why?
Can I ask who wrote that, if they're here? Because there's a reason. So are you thinking of us as young men inspired to priesthood? Or are you thinking about today? You know what I
I
mean?
think when you were younger.
Yeah, I thought you did. It's easy.
Okay,
You ready?
sure.
Drum roll. St. Francis of Assisi. I just always was very attracted to his life, his simplicity. And then later, much later, when I had the chance to go to Italy and go to Assisi, oh my gosh. And when I've taken groups at least 2 or 3 times over to Italy, and you go through Italy, you go through Assisi, of course, Rome, and all the great cities, all the way up to Venice. But they'll always give the same answer. Their favorite place was Assisi. And I think that's because it's so quaint. And if you've been there, you know. It's very quaint. You can walk across the town in about an hour and a half, 2 hours, easily. And so Francis always inspired me. Today, you know, there's many other saints. Just did a trip through France last April, a year ago, and all the saints of France, Saint Therese of Lisieux, and our saint as priest is Saint John Vianney. He's an amazing saint. Saint Bernadette, oh my gosh, Lourdes today is incredible. So today, probably my most go-to saint. Anybody want to guess? Anybody know me well enough?
Padre Pio. Padre Pio. Padre Pio.
Hello, Padre Pio. Who's he? He's a monk, Franciscan monk, but from a little town of Piotricino in Italy, and a very miraculous saint. Thank you.
Gary got it first.
My favorite saint, he's actually an American blessed, but and I've talked about him several times, but it's Father Walter Chiswick. So he was an American Jesuit that went over to Russia during the beginning of right before the start of World War II, where Germany invaded Russia. And he was going to go undercover and be a missionary because the church was being very radically persecuted then. And he wound up getting caught right away. As soon as World War II started, they rounded up all the foreigners with the idea that they could be spies. And he was put in a prison camp for 15 years. And then after that, he wasn't allowed to leave Russia for, I think, another 10 to 15. And it was his sister. He was able to get word out to his sister just through some very back channels and say, I'm still alive. And then her sister went to the government. The government then did a hostage negotiation and got Walter Chiswick to come home. And he wrote 2 books, He Leadeth Me and With God in Russia, 2 of my favorite books of all time. And I think what inspires me is, first of all, he is like a modern saint. And so sometimes there's what we call hagiography. So in other words, they take a saint's life and like all the humanities get stripped out of their story, and they're doing these miraculous things and they're doing these superhuman things, which is great. But what I like about a lot of the modern saints is that you see a lot of the warts and everything, you know, the failings, and that they are human. And that sanctity doesn't mean performing miracles or, you know, doing those amazing things. It does mean living your life heroically for God. And Walter Chiswick, I mean, just his story is very amazing in that way. And for me, I think when we're dealing with a real lack of, or like a loss of faith in our world today, I look at those major events like the Holocaust or being in a prison camp in Russia and those kind of persecutions that have happened, and you just see that some people will end up having that experience and say, there's so much evil here, God can't exist, and they become angry with God and they abandon all faith. And then you have another group of people that they experience the exact same thing and they get this unshakable faith that nothing can get rid of. And my question has always been for myself is, what drives people one way rather than the other? And I think when Walter Chiswick, I mean, when you start reading his story, for me, that's why it's so inspirational, is because you start to see what that is, and how he was able to make the choice for God in those darkest moments. And I think just giving us a way of being able to, you know, hold on to our faith today in the midst of a generation which has honestly gone mad.
So I got a question. So was there a saint when you were young that inspired you maybe towards priesthood or early in your seminary days, but somebody earlier or not so
Yeah,
much?
I'm trying to think about who, I mean, because I've always had a devotion to St. Thomas More. And I think one of the best biographies that I've ever read of any saint was a biography called Portrait of Courage, which is about him and just his entire life and his works and everything. And I mean, just what an amazing man, just overall. So I think St. Thomas More was one, but as far as the priesthood was concerned, it's so interesting how few diocesan priests there are that have been canonized saints. And it's not because diocesan priests aren't holy, it's because unfortunately the canonization process requires the ability to give like a priest or somebody the time and have the money to be able to research this life, the person's life, and put all the resources together. And people in the religious life have all sorts of time to do that. And meanwhile, the diocesan priests are trying to keep the lights on, you know?
We're working.
We're working. Yeah, we're working hard. That's what we're doing. So,
yeah.
so I mean, you see, so somebody like Philip Neri, he was kind of a quasi-diocesan priest.
Yeah.
But then also, I mean, St. John Vianney, I think those are the only two that I can think of off the top of my
John
head.
Vianney's an incredible story.
Right.
Should have never been a priest.
But then, as my previous pastor, Father Jack Costello, would always say, he would be like, you know, again, with all these religious priests, you've got St. Francis of Assisi, we've got St. Peter. You know, St. Peter was the first diocesan priest, and he was just a very excitable person. He would just go off on his tangents. So
You knew him pretty well.
I did. If you knew him, that would be laughing. That was spot. So.
He would visit people in his parish during the COVID. He'd drive around in his car. Hey! Turn off your lawnmower. Hi, how you doing? And he'd go to the next house. What do you want? I don't know.
Right.
Is that pretty accurate?
Pretty accurate, yeah.
What was the name of the book from St. Thomas More, please?
Portrait of Courage.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. How different is it, both of you, now that your role as pastor associate has changed? I mean, being an associate, or I think associate pastor, it's essentially for me, it was learning the priesthood for the first time. That's obviously different than Msgr, which is, you know, kind of like revving down from being pastor. But you know, I think that there's just learning curves that are involved. I mean, I remember my first 3 years of priesthood. It's learning how to like live as an adult for the first time. You know, you're not under the structures of seminary. But it's also trying to learn the basic roles of being a priest. I remember you told me a story after maybe my 4th year of priesthood, and you were saying, when you first got there, you were like, I'm so busy today. Like, I've got to say Mass in the morning, and then I've got a marriage prep, and then I've got a funeral today. I was just like, and you were thinking to yourself, that doesn't sound like all that much. And, and so I mean, and that's the thing is that, just over time, that's how I feel now as I look at basically what my schedule was back then. I'm like, wow, that was really light. But it's kind of God giving you the ability at that particular time of getting used to those things. And now I know what to do during marriage prep. It doesn't take as much prep time. You've given homilies for 10 years. You've got a good repertoire. You know how to what your style is, and you've preached on these gospels now multiple times. So I guess that was the learning curve for being an associate. And it's also just when things are when they're hard, like what does picking yourself back up and look like? And I think a lot of that is learning. Well, what does prayer look like during those times? But then, as pastor, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It's a learning curve because there's always something new that's getting thrown your way that you've never dealt with before. And so that's But I think a lot of the lessons about being pastor, they're learned early in the priesthood because that's the way the priesthood is. Everything is always going to be new. There's always going to be something thrown that's new at you. I guess just as pastor, there's a lot more of them, a lot quicker.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Boy, that's true. Yeah, more young